Hello, everyone, and welcome to the tavern. Tonight on Gatekeepers, we're discussing player rewards. If you like what we have to say, make sure to hit that like button. If you really like our content, make sure to subscribe to the channels, both mine and the other channels listed in the video description below. Hello, my name is Jaide, and tonight we're discussing player rewards. Now, I do have a little bit of a blurb to say on this. What kind of, when rewarding players, what do we take into consideration as game masters when determining what and how often of rewards to give? To help me with this discussion tonight, I'm going to be bringing on Shadow from Shadow and Sun. Welcome,
Good evening,
sir.
folks. And real quick, don't give him a damn thing. Make him earn every bit of it.
Yes. So, how are you doing, Shadow?
I'm doing great. Like I said earlier, just got back from a 2-hour hike with the boy and just beat the rain. So it's all good.
Oh, nice.
Oh, and I got something really epic to show off because it just came in the mail today.
Okay. Oh, what is that?
Chald from Avengers Titanus.
Okay. That's really nifty.
And of course, he autographed it for us. With his little John Hancock. Yeah, very cool. I can't wait to start reading that, but I got to finish up one other book, even though kind of hating it, but we'll talk about that later. Don't you hate that when you get a book, like a new game, you're all like pumped to get it and read it, and then you read it and go, this is dog water. I could write better than this.
I've had that happen several times, actually. Most time, and that's why I go after PDF documents before I even ever consider a print document. Because I'll read through and. Huh?
And it's worse because one of my best friends in the whole wide world recommended it, and now I got to tell him, dude, what the hell were you thinking? What the?
Well, I mean, there's got to be something about that game that they really enjoy, right?
No? There are aspects of it that I like. I'm not gonna lie, but it's not the rules.
Okay. Yeah, I'm giving it about 5-ish minutes. At 5 minutes, we'll dive into the content here. We're just
okay. Here's my thing. I know it's micro, but okay, you're doing a high tech game, right? Like really high tech, right? Flashlight. How far is it going to illuminate, and how well is it going to illuminate?
Standard flashlight.
Like a good one.
A good one? Okay, a decent flashlight I would expect to be able to illuminate 50, 60 feet ahead of me.
20 feet. In the future.
Okay.
They clearly don't know. I mean, that's been a thing of mine lately. I've been noticing that people don't apparently shop for like good stuff. You know, if you get it at the Dollar Tree, 20 feet, yeah, that's about right. You know, 2 AA batteries, yeah. But, high tech hundreds of years from now, it'll be the size of a nickel and it will light up a ballpark. You know what I mean? We're talking the future.
We can do that now. We've got the technology now to light up an entire ballpark.
I got this flashlight for Christmas 2 years ago. 2 years ago, mind you, the book I'm talking about was written in 2019. I got a flashlight 2 years ago, and I can literally piss off the people at the church that's like 1,000 yards away. I can irritate them at nighttime and light up the whole church with a $20 flashlight.
Wow. Some games just don't age well. Especially
it's not even a matter of aging. It's just like go out and do some stuff,
Right. Go do some research.
Just go outdoors and go camping. You go camping once right now, you drop $100 to get all the minimalistic crap, and you'll get a really good idea of what the average adventurer is going to have to, need and deal with. And it's just like, come on, guys.
Yeah. All right. So that's after the 5-minute mark.
Let's
So
light this candle. See what I did there?
yes. So let's get into it. So some game masters keep their player characters poor in resources, while other game masters might drown their player characters in more wealth than may be considered reasonable. When to reward, as well as how much to reward, can be a balancing act that newer game masters, may struggle with. Yet I have also heard of, even more experienced game masters at times conflicted with what kinds of rewards to make available for their PCs. And higher level parties tend to, get a little more ridiculous and game bending in terms of rewards. So the first part of tonight, the first major topic of tonight is going to be about experience points. So in many games, the currency of acquiring levels or powers, is tied to experience points. The varied amounts, given, or how they're used. The idea is that the characters do various tasks, circumnavigate challenges, or defeat foes to gain experience points. That experience is then used by the character to determine when and what new powers or abilities they gain. So, this question is first to you, Shadow. Do you reward experience from a chart or table out of a book, or do you use your own method and therefore judgment to determine the amount of experience to reward?
Well, right off the bat, it's going to depend on the game. With that said, normally I play, like, when it comes to experience point games, I'll play Palladium or AD&D, maybe Call of Cthulhu. I think that does that as well, and a few other games. Right off the bat, I'm going to go with, whatever the book says, this is how we do it. But then when it comes to, because almost every book, leaves it up to the GM to award, like, bonus points for heroic deeds, ingenuity, sacrifice, things like that. Some games even reward you for dying and coming back to life. Well, I'll give them it for dying, but they're not coming back because, why would you want to? I mean, unless you're, going to hell, you know what I mean, and literally going to be being tormented, why would you want to come back? It'd be like, once you get there and what's there on the other side, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm home, forget it, sorry guys, good luck, see you when you get here. Nobody would want to come back.
There are
exceptions where you leave your friends hanging, or the fate of the world is, in the balance or something like that. But, that should be like 1 in 10 of the deaths should be like that. All the other ones are like, you screwed up and you're dead. You know what I mean? It's not until, 10th or 20th level when you start making a, worldwide difference in the campaign, if even that, so you should be, like, no, I don't want to come back, guys, but with experience points games, I find that for me, I don't mind them rising up levels to a certain point. I'm not going to say faster than what's normal, because what's normal is to give them nothing and make them grateful for every, tiny little drop of anything. That sort of mentality just bothers the hell out of me. I can handle any challenge. You give me you come to my table with a 100th level character, and I will challenge the heck out of you without any sweat off my brow. It's not a problem to do that. I hear that all the time. Well, they get too high, it's too hard of a challenge. If all you're thinking about is combat, then yeah, then maybe it's a challenge for you because you're not used to playing a character, getting attached to a character, and wanting to keep going, wanting to not just say, okay, well, we're too badass for the DM to handle. I guess it's time to retire. No, it's like it's time for the DM to take a break, go play a character that they really enjoy, and get there and feel what it's like when the DM cuts the legs out from under them, going, well, time for you to retire because I'm at my limit of being able to challenge you. Look at their characters, look for their weaknesses, remember what they care about, and then take all that away. There's your challenge. Now get it back. Or find things that will motivate them. They don't always have to be combat. That's if all you want is combat, there are lots of video games and war games to get that same feel of just combat if that's what you and your players want. But challenges, I mean, in our regular, everyday, mortal, normal, boring lives, we have all kinds of pain in the ass challenges before us every day. And like none of us in our circle of friends are going out there facing any kind of, risk to our bodily selves unless it's accidentally hitting ourselves with a hammer while we're putting up a picture. You know what I mean? We don't have those kinds of challenges. We got all kinds of challenges. And in the real world, we go up in levels too. We get promotions. We, come to new plateaus and surpass them and become better at whatever it is we do. So I like to get them to a certain point, and then maybe I'll pull back the reins a little, let them enjoy that sweet spot before the next sweet spot, depending on the game system and where that might be. But I'm not going to hold back if they, if they're enjoying the process and they're enjoying that leveling up process, the adrenaline, the endorphin releases, and all that stuff. I'm not going to just go, oh, okay, you made second level. It'll be like 4 months before you get to third. That's if you've ever dealt with any kind of junkie, they're not going to wait 4 months for their next fix. That's why we have problems with these kind of games, is because people are constantly expecting it, and if they earn it, cool. But there's other things like we're going to talk about tonight that can take the place of the standard leveling up. There are other ways to sort of level up or get the same reaction within that is the players actual bodies, the physical reactions they're going to go through when at the table, whether being scared to death, which is kind of an iffy thing, but excited, depressed, angry, frustrated, all those things we can we can make we can make them feel if we're up to the task and we know our trade. Obviously, Max, but it's also an expectation for them to come back to the table, and I'm more concerned with that than anything else. Too many games I've seen just peter out, and it's because there isn't a mutual understanding. The players give up their time to be at the table. The DM gives up his time to be at the table. But if you're going to tell me it's going to be like a year for a level, I got better things to do. I can bring a character from first to 10th, as opposed to from 12th to 13th or whatever. If it's going to be a year, I'm out. I got better things to do. Why? I've literally seen dungeons, pre-made dungeons back in the day that will. There's a lot of shitty players out there. There's a lot of shitty DMs and a lot of shitty people. I don't really associate with any of those people, but I want everybody to have a good time, including myself, and that implies getting them back to the table. And if changing my pace is what it takes, I can accept that challenge. I'm okay with it. Damn, I'm actually maybe lose my train of thought.
So, as far as rewarding experience points goes, being a 3.5 or 3x Pathfinder 1E player, and a longtime game master of the 3x system, a lot of the experience points are rewarded out of the DMG or for 3.5 and or the monster manual or bestiaries for Pathfinder. They've got XP ratings, and oftentimes, if I'm running that system, that's the XP system I'm going to use. I'm not going to overly complicate my life by trying to make new, methods of leveling, new experience points, because it's already built into the game. However, if I'm running a game that doesn't have levels or doesn't have that kind of experience point system, I'm going to take a hard look at the experience point system built into the game or the leveling mechanic of the game. I'm going to take a hard look and judge, based on how fast I want the player characters to level up. To me, it depends on the game system. Generally speaking, most of the games out there have a okay leveling mechanic. They might be a fast track, they might be a slow track or a medium track of XP, like Pathfinder, or they might have something completely unique, like loot-based leveling, where your loot is your experience points. I know that I recall a conversation about basic or advanced D&D doing that. I've never experienced that part of it, mostly because my forays into
AD&D gives you XP for just about everything, whether it be treasure, magic items, kills, some other things like I was talking about. Like
foray into AD&D what lasted all of about a month, and we didn't gain any experience at all. We just kept failing. So take what I'm going to say with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's not a possibility. I mean, unless you're all in comas.
It happened.
Yeah, even in second edition, you literally would have to be in a coma to get nothing.
Or the game master just didn't believe in rewarding players. So anyway, moving along.
It's not just about leveling, but that is the only way the players' minds understand usually that they've done something to feel that sense of reward. You can tell them all kinds of, everybody loves you and you save the town, the village, whatever, they're all, but at the end of the day, if they're not seeing any progress on the old progress bar, they're going to think that they're doing something wrong or that you're a skinflint. And maybe that's, the way you want to run things, but I'd rather, see, for me, it all boils down to the simple mechanics of being able to throw new challenges at them. And by new challenges, I'm talking specifically right now about new monsters. I get really bored with, the idea of fighting the same monsters over and over and over and over again, whether it be orcs or goblins or giants, you're stuck. Everything you're going to fight for the next 6 months of game time is going to be some form of orc or giant or whatever. I like to move from one kind of group of monsters to some crazy monsters, some new crazy monsters. There are, just in the 3 monster books that I get, that I have, the Monster Manual 2, and the Fiend Folio, there are, close to 500 different monsters. And I want my players to get, the opportunity to fight a lot of different things. For me, the ideal party gets to fight, almost every monster in the book, like once. Some of them a couple of times, undead and things like that, and things that are really fun in large groups, skeletons, and sometimes orcs and kobolds and goblins early on. That's fun. Even later on, that could be fun. But I want to see them, encounter the really off the wall monsters that nobody ever gets to fight. Like the Parrotin. I've never fought one as a player, and I've almost never thrown them at players. And when I do, it's like, whoa, wow, that's new, that's different, and it brings to the game and the combat a whole set of new challenges that, you know, they have to think, oh, what does that monster do? You know, because they've never fought it. And, you know, what should we do? How do we deal with it? I like that aspect of newness.
Okay.
And again, to what Max was saying, yeah, you know, I'm not saying that they have to get a level every game, every night, but there should be a steady progress of some sort of advancement. You know, like I said, it doesn't always have to be a level, you know, but uh, what's wrong with it? You know, if for me, I mean, I don't, I'm bored up until like 10th level. Okay, as a game master and as a player, I want to get into those really heavy duty, hardcore, you know, epic battles, epic intrigue, you know, the domain play, the world, you know, exploring, you know, maybe the outer planes and things like that. You know, but if every game is just going to stop at like 10th level, you know, even after, you know, a short time or a long time, you don't get to do that other stuff that we hear so much about, you know. Yeah, yeah, exactly. 2,600 monsters. And in my collection, I've probably got, you know, crap tons, you know, more than just 500 to work with, you know, between Arduin, AD&D, second edition, and other things. Uh, I'm bored with the same old Max. I've literally played thousands of games with 1,000 different players. I've done most of the stuff you're talking about. I'm allowed to be bored. Okay. I've
Yeah.
literally done the zero to hero like 500 times with different groups. I'm allowed to get bored. I'm going to go look for new, broader horizons.
I mean, that's what I did, and that's why I landed with Index Card RPG. Is, you know, there are no levels to it. You know, player advancement is based on
Right.
what they do, what they discover, and, you know, how they go about doing it. And game masters are encouraged to offer, you know, new and interesting words that are not listed in the book. Like the game masters are encouraged to DIY their entire game in every
Right.
aspect about it. So that's, you know, that's why I'm gravitating towards that system so much lately, is because, you know, I am a DIY gamer. I am a DIY game master. I have my own world. I have my own mechanics that I want to use. So I'm going to hack and rebuild and mod my game how I want, you know, players to experience it. So I'm going to be, you know, looking more into the non-level based games. So what does that leave me with? Well, that leaves me
Traveler.
with, well, Traveler. But, you know, as far as like, what do I reward my players with? I mean, so experience points for me are becoming less of a thing because I'm moving away from an experience point and level based gameplay system.
Right.
So
Same
now,
here. That's why I threw in Traveler. But I was talking specifically if I am, because I am in several level based games, Villains and Vigilantes right now, which
mhm,
was uh, Vigilante City, but we switched over in Bloodworth's game. I don't know why, but we did. And I'm in an AD&D game, and I'm in a Traveler game, and I'm going to be in a couple other games, Axe and things like that. Well, when it comes to a level-based game, though, you know, it's part of the mechanics of the rules. That's, you know, that's how you know you're making progress. Now, obviously, progress to other people and, you know, different people has different meanings. But in those games, we fall into that trap of, you know, that's what we get. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Even you know, in a lot of games, if you show up for the night, you get X. Okay, let's say it's 100 XP per level of your character. At the end of the night, you get that automatically for showing up and participating. Well, if you do the math, that's a guaranteed level in X number of games. It could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 50 later on down the road. That's not including any of the other stuff you might do. So it's just a matter of time, and the players have every right to resent someone holding back, you know, saying, "Oh, at the end of the night, you get no experience points." What? You know, I mean, so I didn't learn anything from tonight because that's what it basically boils down to. What did your character learn over the course of the night's gameplay? Did you learn anything? Now, obviously, in non-level, non-XP based games, they can still, take a post-it note and write down a list of things that they learned or their character learned that night. And that is kind of where the focus should be, is what did you learn?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so because I am moving away from level-based gameplay and experience points-based gameplay,
I like that.
I'm looking at loot-driven games or power-driven games where the characters receive unique pieces of loot or gear, equipment, and whatnot, or even unique powers. So let's talk about loot as reward next. I think because loot is the next most common reward next to experience points. It typically taking the form of equipment, liquid currency, or unique items, and sometimes specially tailored quest rewards. And when I was new to the hobby, I over rewarded my players often. This kind of led to a very unbalanced party, actually, not necessarily unbalanced party, but unbalanced play and difficulty in challenging my players. So how hard is it, for example, for you, for your players to acquire wealth? How hard is it for them to do that?
Well, you'd have to meet some of my players. They're bastards, one and all. So it's not hard. But it depends. Normally, I don't keep them poor, because poor means that it's just boring for me. I'd rather them be able, for example, a lot of it has to do with the visualizations. Okay, Connell had us watch a version of the movie Robin Hood. Okay. And it wasn't the Errol Flynn version, which is my favorite, because that's the only one that really shows the spirit of all the books that were written up until a certain point. And the whole movie has got this gray, ugly, dingy, dirty, boring, filthy, nasty, smelly look to it. Okay. But then you go to the Errol Flynn version and you've got bright colors and royalty everywhere. And, it's just more of a visual thing for me that's more appealing. It's got the bright colors, it's got the shiny armor and things like that. Regardless of how historically accurate it might or might not have been, considering it's a made-up story. Robin Hood was never a real person. And mind you, I'm a huge fan of the whole Robin Hood mythology. So it's hard for me to admit that. But I would rather my players have that same sort of look and feel to the game. I don't want them running around catching rats for 6 months of gameplay. That to me is boring. You know what I mean? If I was that person, if that was my life, I would be like, well, I guess I'm going to become a thief or an assassin, because I'm not going to live like this. I'm going to start just murdering everybody I bump into until I have enough gold in my pocket so I can afford a room and a shower and some clean clothes. I'm not going to live like that. And I want my players to have the bare minimums of cleanliness and regular meals and things like that. I don't want to make them experience what it must be like to be homeless. That's not the kind of story I want to be famous for, or the kind of games that I want to run. And it's definitely not something I want my players to have to go through. It seems like that's what that's all about. And it's like, hey, go volunteer at a soup kitchen and tell me that's what you want to do for the rest of your life. No, you're going to be like, yeah, I'm just going to get a regular job and,
Never run the opening adventure to Tolis. Never run for 3.5. Never run the opening adventure for Tolis.
Well, it's 3.5. That's a guarantee I won't run it.
Well, but specifically the rat killing that you just mentioned. it's like that for a very long
Warhammer
time.
Fantasy Battles is the same way. I want my players to live larger than life, the bare minimums. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I've run the 0 to hero, and I've run the negative levels as well, and I don't know anybody. Yeah, blow me. Sorry, I'm not interested. If that's your idea
Right.
of a good time, I'm gonna go start drinking and hit up the nearest bar and show you that it's just it's nobody would do that. You know what I mean? You
Right.
you want to force your players into that? Why? So they'll appreciate what? Most of my friends have tons of money. They're not going to appreciate that. They're going to be like,
Right.
"What kind of tightwad are you? Can we actually fight something that is interesting?" I mean, it just blows my mind. No, I'm just a nasty son of a bitch who likes what he likes, and I don't want to be bored. That's my arch enemy. I would
Boredom.
rather
Mm.
literally be bleeding than to be bored. Um, and I've done both.
So, thinking more about, actually, I don't think I've answered that question, have I?
No,
We got a little off key there.
no
Get back
worries.
up to it. So how hard is it for my players to acquire wealth? Now, I used to over reward with loot back in the day. Anymore, I take into account what my players currently have versus the kind of challenges I'm wanting to throw at them. And I'm expecting my players to actually expend wealth at some point, be it for inn stays or for land purchases, whatever the case might be. Um, I'm also typically looking at the kinds of things they're fighting, as well as like who's offering the reward. If it's a local duke, trying to get rid of highwaymen off of out of his roads, then the reward might be a little more substantial. If it's farmer James having a problem with his sheep going missing, well, you're going to get what he's got, which is copper. He's not going to have a heck of a lot of money for PCs to roll around and gain off of him. I'm also going to take into consideration the size of the town they might be in. Starting in Metropolis, you'll see more money. Starting in a farm town, you're not going to see a lot of money. What you might see is equipment instead of loot, instead of like liquid cash. You might see, oh yeah, I don't have much money to offer you, but this old sword that's been in my family for hundreds of years from the last major war. Well, I'll let you have that because we don't have a use for it. Like I'm going to. In smaller towns, I'm going to offer like physical objects as a reward rather than money.
That works.
Yeah. So
Especially like, if you've actually done any traveling in the real world and gone to, third world country type of things, I'm not a real fan of that expression, but I know it gives everybody an idea. And I don't want to mention any places in particular, but if you've been to a poor country, yeah, that's the way the feeling is. You may not be able to, get lots of money, but the other things, not just the equipment, but the fact that, I've gone to places where the fact that I was there was just absolutely to them, amazing. That someone from America is in our piece of shit little sorry tiny little village, and we're honored. You're from this great country, and you've decided to visit us for whatever reason. It just makes them feel like, oh my gosh, we've got this honored guest. We have to give them the best piece of meat at the dinner, and things like that. And for good people and good players, they're going to actually maybe catch on to that, and that on its own could be if it was in a movie, you'd be able to read the expressions on the faces of the people, and sometimes that kind of a thing could be its own reward, where they, I know Bruce tries to do it a lot, by doing things like that in his Saturday game, where the people are, just so happy that the players are who they are and why they're there, and the stories that have been told about them, and all the good deeds they've done, and the fact that they're in your little tiny little town, making a stop along the road is like a big deal. Those things themselves can be, at least they should be rewarding to all but the, elite jackasses in the world to feel something, and to, maybe, let it touch their heart a little bit. So it's something that, when you are in a poor location where they can't afford to pay you, or they can't afford to give you some sort of physical, tangible reward that you can take with you, unless it's, a little bit of extra food and water and stuff like that. Maybe as DMs, we can be better at describing those situations so that they can feel that, they've done something that helps their character grow in a way that, maybe the player's like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. But the player, excuse me, would not be so, hard-hearted about it. Right, right, Max. That depending on where you go, people could have that reaction easily, but in other places that are even poorer than that, if you go to places in South America or Southeast Asia, uh, they're going to be maybe not like that. Maybe some people will be, but that's more an indication of that person's character, than the entire society, and maybe they are, they were, formerly communists, and, not going to, say too much about communism, but that doesn't surprise me, that people would feel that way. In other places, though, they would be, honored that you were in their, area.
So when it comes to rewarding loot, in most cases, most game systems have some kind of methodology or mechanic in place for rewarding loot.
Sure.
Or sometimes for like specific monsters, let's say they have a standard array of loot that they have on them, or a table from which to draw on. Do you ever use those tables or the suggested things within a monster's stat block for loot, or do you handpick items and put them there?
Especially, in AD&D, but mind you, I don't need to actually open the book anymore. When it comes to AD&D and second edition and
Sure.
Arduin and things like that, it's all up here. I have a pretty good idea, and if I'm a little generous or a little under, who's going to know unless they literally pull out the book at the table and go, oh, but orcs have this. And like, one, what the hell are you doing with that book at my table? Two, circumstances beyond your understanding have happened so that this is what you get. Nobody ever says, it's too much, or why do they have so much? They may be like, oh, too bad it wasn't more. That's human nature. But I tend to probably give out more because I want the players to be ready for the next bigger and badder challenge. Because I've got to go through it too. I've got to throw the orcs at them, then the lizard man, then the 4-hit die, then the 5-hit die. As those kind of games progress. Other games, it's totally different. But when you're talking about most fantasy Dungeons and Dragon rip-off clone games, they all have that same sort of mentality. You don't throw vampires at them at first level. You don't throw monsters at a second level party when every hit they do drains 2 levels. You just don't do that, because that's just, well, okay, so we're just going to run the entire game. That's what this is. We're going to just run. You know what I mean? Nobody's in for that. Nobody wants that. I like making them run, but if the entire game was all about running and that's all they're ever going to do, nobody would show up. there are kind of rules for those games where, it's a fair challenge. It's not an overwhelming, just okay. Everywhere you go, you're going to encounter liches. Your first level, but the world is populated entirely by liches. No, you start out small and you get them to the places where then they can go to that place that's entirely populated by liches. But that's because they're 15th level too. Then it's fair. You know what I mean? Even though the word fair is somehow a dirty word in the minds of some people, I like it to be somewhat balanced, not entirely. Like I've said before, outdoors, anything goes. Once you go into a dungeon, though, it should be appropriate for you, unless the sign on the dungeon says, don't come in here. There's a platinum dragon in here and you're third level. Okay. But it's kind of, implied since the beginning that you don't start throwing monsters at them that they can't possibly defeat unless you've given them fair warning and they're dumbasses and go, well, I don't believe there's really a platinum dragon in there. Well, there is, you're dead. You died. Okay. You were evil. You went into the platinum dragon's lair and the silver or whatever good dragons just killed you because you're evil. They didn't need a reason. But yeah,
the next non-OGL game system, Dungeon Runner. And you must be this tall to enter the dungeon.
Right. It's just the way it's always been since the earliest of incarnations of Dungeons and Dragons. Outdoors, you can run into anything, but you can also run from anything. But once you go in the doors of the dungeon, it's that part of the Disneyland ride is age appropriate, level appropriate, height appropriate.
Well, I mean,
otherwise, it's just another
dungeons,
version of
you can always run away. You can always leave the dungeon. There is a point of retreat.
Yes and no, because there are and were, especially in the old days, dungeon masters who loved to close those doors and say, no, you have to go all the way to the last room to hit the button to open that door. I've literally been in dungeons like that the only way to open the doors was to push the button at the very last room. There was, obviously,
I've done that to players as well. But not with like mechanic, like a button or whatnot. I have used earthquakes, or if the players have done something that triggered an earthquake, such as the earthquake spell, they might find their way out collapsed, especially if it's their own doing. I'm full on board with consequences of, oh, you cast the earthquake spell underground in a cavern system. Well, I hope you like your choices, because now you're trapped.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that to players, not to force them, to go further into the dungeon, because they really made a really, really poor choice. Did they want to dig their way out? Yeah, a lot of them. Some of them have, done that. They're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to use well, I can't remember what it was, like passage or something, like some kind of spell to pass through rock, which I'm like, okay, cool. You got out, you got out of the cavern system. Congratulations. When you want to come back, the entrance is still going to be blocked because the cave collapsed. But that is not rewarding. That is a topic for a different time. So getting back on track. So I'm not even sure where I'm going with this question, but do you ever take into account your player character's wealth in relation to their presumed power, their appropriate power level? Do you ever take a measurement of that?
I'm sorry, what? I was reading chat.
So while in mid game or like mid campaign, do you ever take an accounting of your player's wealth in accordance with their character level? Do you ever see like where they are?
Oh, I just keep track of it through the whole game.
Oh, okay.
I literally usually have a copy of their character sheet.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
It's just, I mean, it's not really hard. But yeah, and I'll keep track of it. And especially since one of my players take their character sheets home with them. And it's nice to, when I'm writing up the next adventure or whatnot, to know who's got what items and who, what they can do, their spell books and things like that. That way I can think of stuff to get them to, like, especially with magic users, to get them to use something besides just, their offensive spells and then go, okay, well, I'm done for the day. Well, yeah, if all you are is a combat mage, cool. But what
Right.
proficiencies or skills do you have? What languages do you know? Things like that. To come up with new ways to make an interesting and unexpected turn of events from time to time.
Mm. Um, well, you're reading that one. So I do typically take an accounting of characters' wealth and level to see like where they are. And it's not an all the time thing. I don't keep records of my characters or my players' character sheets, but I will occasionally like, hey, can I review character sheets? I'd like to get a approximation of like where you are level wise and like gear wise. I want to see like where you might be lacking or something. Because I do make customized loot at times and place it in the world for people to go find. Or sometimes,
that is the hallmark of my gaming career. That is what I did that people loved the most.
Yeah.
The customization, I mean, every video game does it, but I was doing it before there were video games. And making an item that is specifically designed for this character or that character, and not so much character. I usually design it around a character class or profession.
Sure.
The Holy Sword is the perfect example. Well, because real quick, my players, when they go through a dungeon, every piece of treasure they find goes into a pile, whether it's somebody's bag of holding, whatever. Then at the end of the adventure, they divvy up all the loot, the money, the coins. You get this much, everybody gets the same amount. And then they take turns picking the magic items that they found, okay? They'll roll a die, say there's 10 players. Well, they'll roll a d10, and whoever gets 10, they go first, all the way down to the last player rolled the 1. And, so some people may pick items that other people wanted, but it's like, sucks to be you. Next time we'll roll again, and maybe you'll get to go first. Or if for some reason, there was 15 magic items and 10 players, well, that means 5 people only get 1 item each. Well, whoever was next on the list gets to go first next time. Okay, so there's opportunities for people to, I've had players take the wand even though they weren't a magic user. Well, I'm going to sell it, but I'm the only magic user. Well, that's up to you guys. I highly recommend against it, because someday that's going to turn around and bite you in the ass when they take the +5 bastard sword, and then they sell it, and make sure they sell it to someone who won't sell it to you, type of thing. But so I will make magic items for specific professions. Like, this is the ranger's bow. You know what I mean? Nobody can use it for the ranger. So why are you taking it, Mr. Cleric? Because I'm evil. Oh, fuck you, you're out of the party. But for the most part, my players have always been pretty good about that. There have been a couple of people, my son included, who've done things like that. And it's like, well, maybe you can trade me for it, or you owe me a favor, or I get, you'll help me get the next this or that next time. That's all up to them. But I'll make items that are specifically designed for certain professions. And of course, sometimes I will make, this is obviously meant for so and so. Here you go. And I'll literally write out an index card, and maybe draw a little image of it and put all its known abilities and things like that on it. And I learned that from Arduin, because they made these fill-outable magic item cards. But sometimes that alone,
He's talking about me.
okay, that sometimes that just getting that specialized, personalized item will be so much more appreciated than all the piles of gold coins and experience points and all that other crap. Just a simple index card that you took the time to draw up and roll up or whatever. Yeah, if you haven't done it, try it. And sure, sure. I mean, those kinds of things would really happen if these games were real. Those things would happen because people would be, you know, different ways about different things, trying to keep the profanity down. Because I've already put like $1.50 in the swear jar. People would do things like that in the real world. They would, hell, you'd probably find a lot more inter-party conflict than not in the real world. But we try to use things like alignment and party loyalty and things like that to keep the game nice and friendly, so that the group wants to hang out, and you're not like splitting the party or constantly having a party dissolve because they get into some stupid argument.
Right. I can attest to this one here. So Scott has been my game master before, and he did make a scythe specific for my character. And oh man, the things I did with that scythe were neither pretty nor amazing by some standards. They were epic, but they were epically gruesome in a lot of ways. That was a fun campaign. Yeah. That was a fun campaign. I was an evil warlock, war mage character, and it was a lot of fun. That scythe was awesome. But yeah, so I will make unique items based on like where, like if I see holes in like characters, like in their defenses or in their ability to do things, or if the player has said, hey, I really wanted this character to do this thing really well, but everyone else can do it and I can't, even though I focused my character to do this thing. I'm like, okay, well, let's see where you're lacking. Let's see what your deficiencies are and see, what in-game mechanics that you either aren't using or aren't aware of. And I will help the players out with that. But if I see that, their character was designed with this idea in mind, and I see, hey, there could be a piece of loot or a piece of gear or something that could help them with that, I might just place that piece of loot in their way in a dungeon somewhere or through a role play challenge, whatever the case might be. If a bard's like, hey, I haven't had a music, if a bard is rocking just a masterwork, instrument at level 30, I'm going to do something about that masterwork instrument, because that at level 30 has got to go and get replaced. Like, why didn't you upgrade this? What did you spend your money on? I can think
of reasons why, personal reasons. If said player's father, the bard, handed it down to him, then there might be, that might be, their main musical instrument, and never want to use something else. But you're going way too fast.
Yeah.
I missed all three.
I'll go back up to that one. That's fine. So while you're reading and getting caught up, what are
Fair enough.
some?
Yeah, if you've got someone being a jerk, see, back in the day, with one of my groups, they would have taken that guy out back.
He does go on to say that was a long time ago, and he doesn't generally get players like that anymore.
Right, right. But we're all grown-ass men and women, and yeah, officer, he fell down the stairs.
Yeah. So, what are some loot items that your players treasured the absolute most, if you can recall any?
Oh, geez, yeah.
And if you can recall, like, keep it to one or two. If you can also recall, how did they acquire them?
Well, let's start off with not the craziest thing, because one of the craziest things I threw in a dungeon was a coffin of a coffin of infinite vampires every time you open and close the door. Yeah.
Wow.
But we'll tone it down just a little bit. Was the hovercraft limousine of folding, just like the boat
Okay,
of folding.
how did they get that?
It was literally in again vampire, a very powerful vampire in a high tech game with magic and psionics and all kinds of crap like that. Just way over the top. They broke into his vault, and that was one of the things they walked out with. They didn't know what it was until they got home, and then they found out, crap, we can't really go driving around with this, can we? Well, not on this planet, anyways. Another one I gave a friend of mine who really enjoys it to this day is a Swiss Army knife with just about any tool you can imagine. Just by saying I need a hammer. Okay, well it's basically a hammer. You need a saw. Anything that's a normal item. If he can come up with the words for it, I need a micronized blowtorch. Okay, there you go. Things like that. Nothing. Like it's not like +1 or anything, but whatever tool you need, it just turns into it. And it's the size of a Swiss Army knife, and that's the first thing he takes everywhere he goes. Stuff like that. But I really try to, as you can tell, stretch into really wild areas when it comes to treasure. I don't want to just hand out another +1 sword.
Right. So I also have an example where set the Wayback Machine to, I want to say early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s. The Magic Item Compendium for 3.5 had come out. And one of the things in there was the concept of magic item sets. So if you collect all the pieces of a magic item set, it unlocks super unique powers, for having the full set. Plus, typically you also have to be a true believer because the sets were somehow related to the gods. So I took that concept. I'm like, oh, okay. I like the idea of the concept. And I started making unique item sets based on ascended beings within my game world. One of the players got the regalia of Earth, of the Earth Guardian, and they just loved it. Like every aspect of it, the powers that it gave them, the the armor upgrades that it presented, because it was armor that a druid could wear, because it was like ironwood armor. It was an ironwood breastplate, and he was playing a druid. And it upgraded his armor. It had all these unique abilities to it. And the player, like, even though like the player got it at like level 15 or 16, he continued to use it and upgrade it until like level 40. He just loved that entire set that much. I've also had in Scott's game, the very first game I sat at Scott's table, was he presented us this artifact, this item. And I think it was cubic in shape when we found it. We've ended up calling it the Happy Fun Ball because we had no idea what the hell it was. Couldn't find any like lore about it. But it could change shape to different polyhedrons. And it was such a unique find. And my character, being a Shadowcaster at the time, again 3.5, I was playing the Shadowcaster, and I kept taking the Happy Fun Ball, even though nobody wanted me to have it and nobody wanted me to experiment with it. I just kept taking it and pouring magic and power and everything I could do to try to figure out A, what it was, B, what it was used for, or C, what it could possibly do for our group. And to this day, I still remember that entire campaign and the whole reason for that artifact. That artifact was essentially you pour magic into it and it strips away divinity. So it was our method of battling a insane god, a god who was bent on, I can't remember whose destruction, but it was not going to be good for like most of the world. So my character, being the most powerful mage of the group, started just pouring as much distilled magic that I had into the happy fun ball, because again, we never found out what it was called. But it started stripping away the protections of godhood from the thing, so everyone else could go beat on it until it died. So yeah, that was definitely a loot item that one doesn't actually exist anywhere mechanically in the rules, and it was such a pivotal item to have, because if we didn't have something like that, and if I hadn't figured out I could do something with it, that entire scenario would have ended horribly differently.
Thank you. You just reminded me. I had a group of players. I mean, I still have them as players, but they found a chest that, to this day, mind you, this is 10 years later, they still can't open.
Huh.
And
okay,
Max might know what I'm talking about. There are these things called Dominators in Palladium in their science fiction games that are just, I bumped them up to the. You really need to play Earthdawn seriously. You know what? I'll tell you what. I'll look into getting a copy. Next time I talk to you, tell me which one, and I'll find a copy, and I'll at least give it a read through. But to this day, they still have not found a way to open it, and they actually found out the sort of secret behind my version of the Dominators, which just blew their minds. Which I'll have to tell the story later on, but I need to remind my friend Dave that, hey, remember that box? Yeah, it's still not open. And just end the conversation there, just to irritate him. It's like, oh shit, that's right. What's in that box?
I feel for you, Mar. I do. I've had so many characters that I think, I remember the characters because of the loot they had. Like my namesake, Jaide, was strong enough to be able to use a rowboat as a weapon. So I carried around a boat of folding specifically for the one instance I may need it to flee across water, or, a longship to flee across seas, or in the one rare instance where I have no weapons and I need to beat on something that I can't physically touch because it does damage to me, like a Baylor with a fiery body or something made of acid. So the one time, we were out in the open, no weapons. I think we'd washed up on shore, and I took out the boat of folding against this monster, turned it into a rowboat, slapped it once, and then turned it into a longship and landed the longship on the monster, killing it. Again, I remember a lot of the details about my characters through some of the crazier items or use of, like, unbelievable use of items they did with them. I also remember some of the player, some of my players doing some incredibly off the wall zany things with items that they had acquired that I wasn't expecting. Like, what was it? Connell used a sun, I think it was a sun orb or sun globe or something like that in 3.5. He had it since like level, God, I think level 10 or 11, and we were at level like 30 or 40. They were fighting a bunch of zombies, and I'd sent quite literally 20,000 zombies at them. Granted, the CR of an individual zombie was only like maybe 15 because I'd upgraded them. They were fast. They had a disease quality to them, and whatever. But he had, had or maybe it was vampires. I can't remember. But he had an item that could do lots of damage to a lot of undead very quickly. I'd completely forgotten about it. He had super sovereign glued it to an arrowhead and shot it from a distance and wiped out an entire zone. Awesome. Great use of a item he acquired early on at late game status.
Real quick,
and he still talks about that one.
Mar, you can easily fix that by going shopping in, or at least have your dungeon master do some shopping in some of the higher level, higher tier sort of, men's equipment and gear catalogs out there. Trust me, I see. I watch actually a lot of videos on the newest gadgets that come out there, and oh my god, there's there's so many cool things being made right now. Um, that trust me, if your DM's having trouble, drop them off a Sky Mall catalog or something like that. Second, my gift to you guys out there, one of the one of the magic items I gave out that is still to this day like one of the favorite items that I've given out that I enjoyed, and one of my players, the group, but now my one player, he has it technically. It's a book of treasure maps. Okay, it's a magical book of treasure maps. Okay, that when you say the word on the map, it will teleport you to somewhere on the map. Okay, and mind you, each of these places is an alternate, plane of existence or planet or whatever. They don't know. They've only been to a couple of them, and each treasure that's that the map leads to is supposed to be like, artifact quality level, some sort of mythic, whatever. They don't actually know what it is. There's usually like an image of something on there that's like a clue, maybe even the actual item. And to this day, there was 10 maps. They've only gotten to 2 of them, and they've had it for probably, a dozen years or so. And they've only managed, because it's like a side quest thing. It's like whenever they don't have an adventure to go on, it's like, oh, hey, let's pull out the book. And okay, sure, because they have a way to get home, with various teleportation devices and gadgets like that, to where they can literally, just go home when they're done. But it always keeps them, kind of hopeful for, something really crazy. But at the same time, they've had it, and they've only gone to 2 out of, 10. So
Nice.
Anybody out there wants to borrow that one, be my guest. You'll get a lot of use out of it.
So, besides experience points and loot, some of the other things that we can give out instead could be abilities or powers or feats. In many cases, a game master may feel that treasure just isn't enough of a reward. And then the question then becomes, what can they replace experience points or treasure with? And by rewarding abilities or powers, they also have to take into consideration, like, how does it change the dynamics of the game? Because if you award a top tier feat, or a feat that's much later in the feat tree than they should be able to have, what does that do to the game? So, do you ever replace experience points or treasure with feats, abilities, or unique spells or powers? You ever do that?
Yes and no. I play a lot of games like my longest game that I've ever run is literally probably most technically described as a Heroes Unlimited Palladium game, where they already start out with superpowers, okay, or villains and vigilantes. And mind you, a lot of my games, I actually use multiple game components, not just like one rule, but like big chunks, and add them to the existing game. So giving new powers is kind of not, see, with like Heroes Unlimited, I actually allow the players to gain or mutate their powers depending on the character and what kind of powers they have at like specific levels. It's like 10 and 15th. If they ever get there, then they'll get like a new one, or their power does something similar to another similar power or something like that. So that's already built in. So it's more of the other kinds of things that they'll acquire as a reward. Now with fantasy games and science fiction games that are more hardcore, hard science, I should say. Not really so much. I'll let them, like with Traveler, I may allow them to learn a skill that they didn't have, or a plus on their skill level, which is really not a big deal because of the ability in Traveler to train during your off time to get a new skill or raise a skill level. But I'll use that, if they did something, crazy and they didn't actually have the skill already, or something like that, I'll give it to them at, level. Okay, you now got the skill level at 1. Okay, cool. It's really minor compared to most games, but for the players at the time, or if you take the game, style and mechanics into play, it seems like a huge deal. But to me, it's like you could have had it the whole time and just forgot about it. Wouldn't have made a difference. It wouldn't be a big deal. But for the players, it feels like a really big deal. Now, with traditional Dungeons and Dragons, there are a lot of things like in AD&D, they had level limitations on the non-humans, where they can only go up to a certain level, and if they found the right magic item or like a wish or something, or found a way to increase one of their stats or things like that, or even just like they would sometimes, if they ever found a wish, they would wish to be able to go up to the next level, which was kind of like a rule we developed, to where they could wish for the ability to do so, but they still had to earn the experience points. So say a character could only go to 8th level in X profession, and they didn't have any of the requirements to get to the next level, or they had everything and they were maxed out. There's nothing else they could do. Well, I would let them wish to get there if they earn the XP. Okay, it's a great, drawing away of a wish out of my game, and it gives them something that's essentially nothing, but to them it's a big deal. Or with other things, just being able to acquire that spell they've been looking for, or a better piece of armor or equipment or something like that. Those are usually all they're looking for, because it's easier than to justify that than to justify suddenly you gained a power in a fantasy game, in like a D&D game, without using magic to explain it away. Suddenly they have this skill without training or power. If they want to go in and do that, then any skill is a possibility. If your magic user wants to learn how to pick locks, I can teach anybody on the planet with the $10 set of tools how to do it. You know what I mean? It's not like rocket science.
What about this as a scenario? So you've been dropping clues to your players, and they pick up on a hook that takes them, like there's this wizard tower, and to any wizard who can read the insane inscriptions on the floor of the wizard's tower can gain untold power. And your players go there. The wizard, they get through the tower, they get through all the obstacles and whatnot. They get up to the final room, and the wizard makes sense, with a spellcraft check or whatever equivalent in whatever game system. They make they pass the test, and they gain a new power or spell. Like, is that something you would do? Is that something you would allow in a game?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If if it was my idea to put this in their path, then absolutely. There have been many things where, like, for example, I wanted to, sort of lure my players into other types of games, so that I would throw in elements of those other games as new powers and go, oh yeah, I just took it from this game. And they're like, oh really? What else does that game have? Kind of, here's a little piece of cheese from a bigger wheel of cheese that's called whatever the other game is, yeah, absolutely. All kinds of crazy abilities exist in my library of games, and sometimes one game doesn't have something, and so pulling new stuff from another game is tell them I said adios. Come back soon. Sorry, my son's friend was leaving. They were having we went on the hike together, and they're leaving now, or he's leaving. Sorry guys. But yeah, there's all kinds of things that whether it's a player asking for, something new and interesting, or me rewarding them with something that I think, especially if it's something that sort of allows for them to take the next step in the story. Maybe it's to open a portal or be able to teleport or something like that. If it's going to allow them to get them into the next chapter, then by all means, it's a great way to do it. Especially if you seed that ability, not right before the next adventure, but a couple of levels or adventures prior. Oh, now you've got this ability. Well, guess what? 6 months later, it's exactly what you need to get into the next thing. It's just like giving them a key. Well, now you can.
Right.
You've been carrying the key around for 6 months. Well, now you know what it leads to.
Yeah, I often find that the best way to introduce strange or unique powers is to have them fight an enemy that has that strange or unique power. And then once they defeat that enemy, if they defeat that enemy, they gain access to their research papers, their laboratory, whatever the case might be. And they're like, hey, this is that ability he was using. Let's see if we can experiment and learn how it's done. That's one. Yeah, that's one I've done in the past. And it worked out really great for the players too.
And you can
put them on the same playing field.
You can throw some temptation their way to see if they're going to be the next Dark Lord, because now they have the Dark Lord's journal. You never know what I mean, because that would happen. If players came across the evil magic user's library after defeating him, there's probably a significant statistical probability that they would just fall down in the same path, and that could very well be his Sith-like mentality. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to die, but you know what? My Dark Lord, he's okay with that because he's going to elevate me when I get to hell. But just to make sure that the evil ways continue on this world, my Dark Lord has instructed me to make it really easy for them to access my books of evil. You know what I mean? Because evil would do that. That kind of level, evil would be like, okay, Palpatine, it's time for you to die, but when you die, make sure you leave the key to your vaults, very easy to find, because your Dark Lord and Master wants the evil to continue on. And how hard would it be for a real group of party members to resist that sort of temptation and not end up spreading that sort of evil throughout the kingdom?
Right. Or your game master gives your warlock war mage a scythe, and that scythe has certain unlock abilities, and you discover the first one by accident, for a solo one-on-oneing a unicorn, and you end up killing it in one hit. And it starts to unlock a new ability, and you're just like, wait, what? This thing has unlocks? How? That was a fun one. Then I'm like, oh wait, if this scythe unlocks unique powers when I kill the unicorn, what else does it do? What else do I have to sacrifice to it to unlock more power of it? So that was a fun, unique item. And some of the feats I had to have to be able to unlock further powers. That was definitely something else. That was quite a game changer for me.
Then the paladin burns the library. Yes, that's the way it should be. But
that is the way it should be.
It wouldn't be. You know what I mean? If there was a paladin there, they would be like, "Look, squirrel!" Shove everything into the bags of holding.
Yeah.
And the paladin player would probably let him do it.
Sadly, yes, you're not wrong. But at that point, am I going to offer the XP reward at the highest value for them doing that? Anyway, that we're beyond XP at this point. So when you have offered the chance for players to gain abilities rather than treasure or experience points, what was their reaction? Did they seek out more unique abilities, or did they just prefer the XP and loot system that's already in the game?
To be honest, it is the natural progression. Eventually, players learn that, other than a few magic items, kind of like the old paladin rules, 10 magic items is the limit that they come to the realization that it would be better if that +1 ring of protection was actually just part of my body than something I could lose or someone could steal. We like to say that, but you know what? I've noticed that it's not just the players, but often the DM that would prefer that not to happen. So I mean, you gotta really know who you're
Choices.
gaming with. But
Choices.
yeah,
All players have choices.
most players get to a point where they would rather, especially if they understand the mechanics, of a +1 or a +5 or whatever item, it's better if it just becomes part of you, and if you could find a way to gain those abilities, especially like level progression, the number changes from when you started to where you are now. It's really just shuffling those numbers around or gaining things that increase those numbers that would just be, it would be better off if the players had an ability or something, however you want to hand wave it, to explain why, they no longer carry around their +2 ring because, well, they found a way to get their AC up 2 and their saving throws up 2, and now their ring finger is free to wear some other magic item. You know, uh, it takes a while, but most of us are dealing with very experienced players, if not players that were dungeon masters and back and forth, so they all get the mechanics and the rules and all the different aspects of game theory, to where they whether they like it or not, they're probably doing their own version of min maxing in their head to be better, for their characters to be more powerful, etc. It's very few people that I've
Sure.
met that go out of their way to try to make that character who's not some sort of powerhouse in their own right or their own field. And it's just most people aren't going to be the Gandhi of the group that never wants anything material. It just wants what's good for the world, and those people don't really exist, but for a short period of time, and they're usually not very welcome after the people have got to know them. It's like, you get this tree hugger out of the group. We want, we want to be murder hobos and power fantasy gamers. And what the hell? Why did you invite this person? They're not even cute. So
Man, I'm gonna
it's
get kicked from that group so fast. My paladin's gonna be very much the party pooper. Oh man, that's gonna go
but
great.
that's for you.
So,
For you and me, I've done it too. That's some people. That's what they want to do to challenge themselves. We've all got a different,
mhm.
threshold for what is and isn't
Ooh,
challenging and or boring. And I think it's something that you might want to let your friends know before the game. It's like, hey, look, guys, you're probably not going to dig this, but this is where I'm at, and this is what I want to do, and just think of it from the story perspective as opposed to you know uh,
I'm
you know
jealous, Max. I'm jealous.
um you know right now, for example, this last year I've been I've DM'd a couple of games, but for the most part I'm a player in over the last year. I want to say like 10 or 12 different games that I've been in, including the ones for table breakers, and just as a player. And I've been in at least one game where the murder hobo mentality has been kind of the way I went, but not always. It depends. It can either be a permanent thing or just a temporary thing with where your character is at, or where you want your character to be to feel comfortable. For example, one of my characters was really, really weak, the weakest member of the party, hands down. Just absolutely, and I needed to do certain things to make sure, I just didn't get killed, because that's your main job, is to not get killed unless you want to be the sacrificial lamb. And I've gotten to the point where now I'm not exactly 100% safe and comfortable, when it comes to, getting into a combat situation. But I feel like I'm definitely, not like hiding at the back of the group. I'm definitely, pulling my own weight. And sometimes, you're tempted to kind of do things to make sure you can get to that point. And it's how you behave after you've gotten to that point. If you're still doing the murder hobo thing, then you've probably been infected, and you need to get some penicillin. But if you can get there, make it through that, and then go, okay, now how can I just be a upstanding member of the party, and do what's expected of the character, and how the character would literally act in the game world without being kind of a douchebag. So we're all guilty of it at one time or another. To say that you've never done it and you never will do it is not something I'm going to tell myself. I know I'm going to do it again. I look forward to doing it again at some point, because there'll be a reason for it. It's not just to murder everything, because any game I get into, I trust that my DM has got something decent in store for us. Hopefully not a railroad, but some good times ahead.
So Scott's asking, have you ever used a reputation system or hero points? And this, I think, gets into role play rewards.
Absolutely. With Villains and Vigilantes, Vigilante City, and a couple other games, there are mechanics for
we'll get to that in a sec.
Yeah, that's a big one. A lot of the superhero games have that sort of reputation thing built in, because you're supposed to be the goodest of the good guys. I mean, superheroes are those stories right now in the modern zeitgeist are the biggest examples that people look to, as opposed to looking to things like Thor and Hercules and stuff like that. They don't do that much anymore, but anybody can identify with what, like, Peter Parker or Spider-Man went through, and how he was still the good guy after all the crap that got piled onto him, or even Superman. They could understand those kind of moral good guy qualities. And so for those games, they've got that sort of reward system built in. If you do this part of your character is more pronounced, and your reputation is now from vigilante weirdo to bona fide hero savior of the day type of characters, which is one of the reasons I like those games, is because it's built into the game. You're the good guys. Be the good guys. Try to be the biggest damn hero that you can be. There is no murder hoboism in those games. Sure, you might steal stuff from the bad guy's lair, but it's not the same. You know what I mean? It's got this weird line where when you go into the game, you just automatically know you're gonna be the good guys, and you're gonna strive. It's weird, because I've seen some of my players who've played the absolute evilest SOBs in one game, but as soon as they're playing this other character, it's just like totally different. Just they're looking for ways to outgood each other. You know what I mean? Where they're trying to be like, oh, you're donating $1,000. Well, I'm going to donate $100,000. And so yeah, I haven't said that yet, Max. I remember back in the day when I was working at the game store, which I'm pretty sure this game has been around that long. But there was a joke about the game that I'm not going to mention because I already have to pee. Um, that even the carp were magical. That even a carp could kill you. Just everything was just like super magic. I don't know. Yeah, I try to,
Yeah, I played in that game too.
I try to, run my games like a Disneyland sandbox. I'm not going to tell you which ride to go on, but once you get on the ride, that ride being a dungeon, well, then you know you're on a ride. And even then,
So,
what you do there is entirely on your own, up to you. But if you're going in the Pirates of the Caribbean, you're going to see pirates.
I will say that back to this point here, I don't think I've really used a reputation system per se or hero points, but I really, really enjoy good role play, and I will reward good role play. Instead of experience points or items or whatnot, I'm going to reward role play with either title, land, unique powers. Um, if they do really great role playing, with their deity or their bishop or whatever higher ranked member of the church, they might get a bonus, for the next however long for a mission, from their god. It'd be like a morale bonus or something. If you impress the king, with your display of role play, I might give, a domain or a piece of property in the kingdom to that player to be able to have a base of operations at almost no cost. Like they might have to pay taxes on it. Whoop-de-doo. So, I don't necessarily use a reputation system, but the players, as they gain power and influence within the world through roleplay, people are going to know their name. They walk into a town and people immediately recognize them because either a coat of arms or the colors of garb that they're wearing, whatever it might be, or the one unique staff among the group. People recognize that party, and they're going to go greet the party because they're the big damn heroes. Their name has spread far and wide, and players react to this. Players like being the center of attention. They like the pageantry of their characters, being recognized and being rewarded. So yes, I'm not necessarily going to use a reputation system, but I am going to take it into effect. What have they done for the kingdom? How far spread has their story become? How well do the people know them? Can the people recognize them based on verbal description alone? So I think that in itself is its own reward for the players, not necessarily for the characters.
But it can be both. I wanted to add something. I forgot that he said hero points.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't use hero points. What we used were brownie points. And to this day, my players have never actually spent one. It's now become a like pissing contest to see who has the most unspent brownie points, which were awarded for all kinds of goofy things, whether it be a joke or some heroic or crazy deed. It was just kind of like a catch-all. Here's something else, and you could use them, but nobody's ever actually asked to use them. And I think one of my players has like 112 or something over the course of decades of playing. It's like, every once in a while, he's like, "What are these for again?" It's like, whenever you need a bonus that goes above and beyond, tell me you want to use one or more, and I'll we'll see what happens. Legend
Apparently,
points.
I'm describing Earth Dawn. Yeah.
fair enough. Yeah. There comes a point with at least my game where the characters have been around. Quite a few of them are literally on television all the damn time. So it's kind it's hard to use this as an example, but they've developed their fame to legendary levels. And with fantasy games, my players tend to be the kind of people who actually don't want that, because then that gets them brought before the king to go on a quest. They like to kind of stay in the shadows and do things, and the townsfolk know about them, but it's always like shh kind of thing.
The unsung
Don't
heroes.
Right, which I actually really appreciate, because that way they're showing another quality, which is humility, and just trying to do the right thing for the right reason, not chasing that sort of other path, which most players do. And
The glory seeking.
right, and back then and in real life, people do, but for me,
Mm-hmm.
knowing some of the people I know, with what they've done in real life, it's actually nice that it's rubbed off onto some of my players, because they've met they're different groups of people. The real people in the real world who do that kind of thing don't game, but they've bumped into some of my gamers, and we've shared beers and stuff like that. But with knights and paladins and wizards and even priests, they're gonna chase that fame. So it only stands to reason that that too would go up in levels.
Mm-hmm. So, what other kinds of role play rewards have you given to players, and how did they receive it? Like, or
Well,
instead of how did they like it, or what was their reaction?
there's the land, the title, the different aspects of the reputation, people singing about them, that sort of thing, because that's all they would have. Or even, one time I had my players, they were in a town, and the town had the equivalent of an amphitheater for plays, and they were supposed to go there and get information that was going to be handed off. And it just so happened that the play that was there was the retelling of one of their early adventures, that they were relatively famous for, but far, far away, hundreds of miles away in another area of the land. And I was explaining what they were seeing on stage, and they're like, "Hey, that we did that," and I'm like, "Okay." And they did their thing, But the land and title, I think is one that's really overlooked, because it seems so many people get this in their head that once that happens, the game's probably over. They're being set up to retire, and they rally against that. Like, who the hell in the real world doesn't want to own a house? Oh, but then people are going to steal my stuff when I'm away. Well, no, that's why you hire people, to watch it. Oh, what's to keep them from taking all my stuff? Well, we all do that in the real world. And, I left my house today for a couple hours. Nobody broke in. You know why? Because everybody else near me, because I live in a nice neighborhood, know better than to break into my house. Okay. And if you set up your place and you buy actually good locks and things like that, you know, if the DM's got uh, give them some sense of security. Otherwise, like Mara Hoffman said, they're going to go, no, I don't ever want to own a home. I carry everything with me. I'm going to put all my money into bags of holding and portable holes. You're not stealing everything, And I'm like, whatever gave you that idea? No, this is what normal people do. They get money, they buy a home. Maybe they buy several, and if you pay
And
good,
this is how we get murder hobos.
because nobody wants to actually own a home or build a castle or do all those things that normal people would do, even adventurers. Back in the day when there were adventurers clubs and big game safari hunters, they had places to show off their stuff. And they were never worried about them
Mm-hmm.
being ripped off, because there were guns everywhere. But, they also had people
Well,
who worked there and servants and things like that, and bodyguards and night watchmen or whatever you want to call it, people who would go out of their way to make sure that crap didn't happen because they were going to be the first one to get blamed. You hire the right guards, the right tough guys to watch your establishment while you're gone. They're going to, not only are they going to make sure, none of that crap happens. If anybody comes on the property, they're going to have those people waiting in a special room when you get home, so then you could deal with them. Guido is going to have, hey, these are the 3 guys who tried to burglarize the place. How long have they been here? About 6 months. And then,
Yeah, and when you give a domain to players, like, don't immediately start attacking it or thieving it. Like, it should be a secure place. If a king or duke gives out land and a domain to the players, normally it's going to come with staff. It's going to come with its own, people to monitor and maintain it. So, it's not going to be it should not be a point of contention because it's owned by the duke or owned by the king. The last thing you want, to have happen is have king's property or duke's property attacked. The duke's not going to blame the player characters. The king's not going to blame the player characters. What they will do is they will set the king's watch, and they will send, armies or militia members to go deal with thieves or intruders. So your domains that you give to players should be safe. They should be secure. They should be well armed or armored,
and welcoming,
and they should be staffed and welcoming. Yeah, it shouldn't be a, hey, I'm going to give this to you and then I'm going to wreck it every chance I get. That makes a adversarial game master and adversarial players, and that's not what you want to have happen.
That's why so many games can't make it to that point or beyond that point. But another thing I like to do whenever I do that is that if I give them some sort of land, excuse me, or something like that, like say that, there was one time where the players inherited a mansion. Well, that mansion had a dungeon underneath it. They had to go through every room of the mansion, and then they found this like secret door, and then that led to all this other intrigue and cool stuff and treasure and things like that the uncle had left in his secret laboratory and stuff like that. And it led to a part of the adventure that lasted months of them going through this place and clearing it out and doing all this cool stuff. And then they felt attached to it. It was like, this is our freaking home, or my home or whatever, and or a castle, say, well, the king is giving you this land, but there's a catch. It used to be the home to this mad priest or something, and while most of it is safe, there's some underground areas that we're pretty sure that there's probably like a manticore down there or something, and we haven't been able to get anybody.
Catacombs.
Right, and it's yours to do with as you wish. You could just lock the doors and let it starve to death, or you guys take care of Scott, or you guys can go and clear it out and see what's there. I mean, you could even give these things to players at a lower level, knowing that they're going to get to that point, because if somebody does something, the king isn't going to ask, are you 9th level? Oh, well, you can't, you could be 4th level and be given a huge estate because of something you did, because of the gratitude of the king or the queen or the emperor or whatever. And you could use, give them a free, base of operations, a way to feel safe, to where they're not constantly living in, bed bug infested, inns and taverns, their whole life. Eventually that, that gets old and tiresome. Maybe they'd like to have a nice, base of operations, a home of their own, because I was in a game where I had the money. My character had the money to build. All I wanted to do was just build a tower, just one solitary tower, DM said, well, you're not ninth level. I wasn't even a wizard. Okay, I was running a ranger. I'm like, I just want to build the tower to store my stuff. Okay, to have a place to sleep, and out in the middle of nowhere, well, you're a ranger, you can't do your ninth level. I'm like, what? I can't buy a house?
What?
I've got the money. What am I supposed to do with the money? I mean, most of it was in a bag of holding and converted, platinum to gold to platinum, platinum to gems, that sort of thing. It's like, well, you can only own what you carry. Well, yeah, but you can still carry a lot if you're smart. It's like, well, instead of carrying it around and constantly worrying about it, just want to build a tower out in the middle of nowhere that no one's gonna, you can't exactly walk off with it. But at the same time, if anybody tries to take it over, I just, beat down the door and kick their ass and take it back. But yeah, it was just like, so there's that kind of mentality. But for the most part, if your
what's
players,
so special about ninth level?
it's just the way the rules
that makes no sense.
It was kind of implied that in AD&D that most characters had to wait until they got to that point to start doing that, but it was mostly because at that level they got followers and things like that, so that if they built it, then they would get the followers. And I'm like, well, you can get henchmen and hirelings before that, so why can't you buy the one? If my son, he's 18 years old and he inherits, or wins the lottery and is now a millionaire, you're telling me he can't buy one because he's not 21? Bullshit. What's happening? Multi-gun, how you doing, man? So it's another great way to siphon off some of that money and make it more reasonable, because characters walking around with 20,000 gold coins in their bags of holding and stuff.
Unreasonable.
It's kind of, I mean, even if the bag can hold it, it's kind of stupid. You know what I mean? You really want to walk around with that kind of money? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, sounds like someone didn't understand the difference between domain at play and a castle and a house. Yeah.
Long time ago. But I've seen similar and heard similar stories. And it's a great way to, not only siphon off a big chunk of that money they have, but also give them a reason to keep putting money into that same investment. Because, sure, you bought the house. Now you want to buy the land surrounding it. Now you want to hire people to till the land, watch over the land, take care of the animals and the food and all these things. And you could, slowly over time build up a lot of people who actually give a crap about your character. You don't have to wait until your ninth level. You could start building that up.
Well, I actually, in the most recent game that I played at Scott's table, my character started with land. Like, he was landed gentry, though he couldn't use the land or title that came with it. Otherwise, it would start a blood hunt for his family, because his family used to be, like, set the Wayback Machine to 300 years prior. They used to be the ruling the house or ruling family. They got ousted, and there was basically a blood hunt put on them that anyone found of that bloodline would be ruthlessly and viciously murdered. So they eventually landed themselves between the dwarves and the elves in that world and made a winery. They grew grapes and made wine and became merchants under a different name. So my character started with that, and it was actually the point of, or the scene of, several major happenings within the campaign. Like, most of the campaign took place way out, east from there on the front lines of, I can't remember, I think it was a Knoll invasion. But we would eventually circle back to that property where things would happen. Like, weddings happened there. My characters included. There were break-ins. I had one instance of a break-in, and then one instance of I think it was like some noble found out that my character's family name, of what it truly was, and tried to hunt down the character's family. And let's just say it didn't end well for that noble. Things went really bad for them very quickly. I made sure of that. Because my character was, again, had shadow casting powers. I just love the concept of shadow casters. They're really cool to me anyway. So I had that teleport ability or some such.
It's not all it's cracked up to be. No, I'm kidding. That was one of the things that I loved about the Unearthed Arcana for AD&D. Every character had to roll up a social score, okay? And it gave all these descriptions of what people at that level would have. And I loved using it because it also, gave you like how many brothers and sisters you had and things like that, which all lead to, because so many times I've had characters or players in my games, and their characters were orphans, had no family, didn't care, didn't want to have any of that. That doesn't matter. None of that is part of the game. I'm just me. I'm an island. I've got none of that crap, and all that stuff actually leads to other ways you can reward your characters. Inheritances. You get to a certain point, you did something good, so you get a letter, and now you've inherited this land from Uncle so and so, or it's Auntie such and such's 112th birthday, and you're invited, and all these things that would be realistic that people just totally nope, it's just town dungeon forever. Instead of the actual real things that can lead to other ways to reward characters, instead of what's in the next treasure chest. There's so many things that you can do. If you've ever read like a single novel, it's not like I said, town dungeon. There's so many other things that would take place, and there's a huge amount of people in the hobby that have no concept of how to run that or play that, or that it even exists.
Yeah, so in the next game I'm getting ready to play, again, this is at Scott's table. I've talked a lot about his table tonight because that's a lot of where some of these rewards have come from that I've talked about. And Andy was in chat. But the next game he's starting up that I'm invited to, my character is going to start with effectively his own home, his own business and whatnot. He's going to already be started, married with children, and he's going to be a paladin. He's going to be a paladin. He's going to, and the paladin's occupation is not paladin. It's actually carpenter. He is going to go build houses and furniture and such. His wife is going to be, or is the daughter of a blacksmith. So she took,
familiar. Why does
I know, right? I know, right? I like the concept.
Yeah, that's the only thing I liked about those books.
Right? I am modeling that character after that character from that book series.
Summer's almost here.
Yeah, you get reading the next book in that series. Anyway, that character is it is based off of a pre-existing character, but I'm putting my own spin on it, and I'm going to be playing a Redeemer Paladin, not a fire, brimstone, everything evil must die. No, every mortal who is evil must be saved. That is going to be my concept. And the fact that he is a carpenter, if he comes across highwaymen, he's not going to put them to the sword. He might bring them to, the local magistrate and then vouch for them like, hey, these people need work. It's not that they're bad people. They have no way of making money. They have no way of making a living. Allow me to take them in, teach them my trade of carpentry, and put them to work so they can make money. That's going to be basically my entire concept. Yes, he's an elf. Yes, he's going to have the more elven architecture theme or motif about him, but the character's occupation is going to be carpenter, because it is a trade that is not just useful but can be taught easily to just about anyone, and that's going to be part of his redemption speech.
Come on, come
Because
on,
let
come on,
me
come on,
teach you
come on.
my trade.
You could have picked stonemason. You could have picked baker or barber.
Well, okay, so the character was going to be an elf from the very beginning. So I figured carpenter made more sense than stonemason. Carpenter made more sense than I don't know, magician or something like that, or farmer, because again, he's from an elven village who spent their entire life in trees around wood. So he was basically a craftsman of wood,
No, I
carpenter.
love
It
it.
just
I
made
love it.
sense for me with that character.
It just it's we borrow where
Yeah,
we see value. No,
yeah,
I'm digging
and
it.
I see a lot of value in that character. So,
I hope
but
it's a great game. Look forward to hearing
so do I.
more about it.
I'm looking forward to it. So, all right. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job with some rewards, some concepts of rewards, and how to reward and what to reward. Do you have any closing thoughts for this?
Just one. I think we came up with a possible topic for a little bit down the road from tonight's discussion. We'll talk about it in a moment. But yeah, this was a very, very enjoyable conversation. I was looking forward to it all week.
I can tell.
No, there's so many things that I see people missing out on in the gaming, in the hobby. There's so many things that people just gloss over when bonsai tree curator that we could, especially with the mentality of a certain demographic of our hobby that want things a certain way, and this we could kind of meet in the middle here, and give them some of what they want, less violence and more of the role-playing aspects of a slice of life kind of thing, but at the same time use it to be the springboard for the adventures instead of it just being one dungeon after another. I've been in games where there have only been a couple of dungeons, but I've been in other games where there have been like countless. We can't even remember all the dungeons that we've been in because it was just one to the next, like they were that like a video game or something, but that's all there was to the game. I know it was called Dungeons and Dragons, but if you go in the original Dungeon Master's Guide, a huge significant portion of that book was everything but that. It was all the things that we were talking about, the different things that your character would actually do more than going into a dungeon. In the Lord of the Rings, there were only less than 5 dungeons in the whole story, or things that you could consider a dungeon. There really weren't that many. Yeah, a lot of it was overland, but a lot of it was also the slice of life kind of experiences that real characters that people would want to read about would experience and go through. I know like Conan glosses over a lot of the things in between each adventure, but not always. Toward the later portions of those books, you get more into what it would be like from day to day for those characters or Conan, that shouldn't be just glossed over.
Right. So my final thoughts on the topic of rewarding your players is, you can have milestone rewards. They can be big or small, for the completion of a story arc or adventure. You can have achievement feats, or achievement powers where, if a character does certain things, they get a reward. You kill the servant of a god, just as he's awakening, and bathe in its blood by choice or accident, and something happens. Because it'll have some kind of trigger mechanism to it to unlock. Kind of like achievements from video games and such. But you also have story rewards. Oftentimes in Pathfinder or 3.5, you would find a little XP number based on a story reward. And, using that same model, you can give other rewards for interacting and actually role playing with the world. I'm a fan of specific quest rewards. Like I drop in like little clues or hints or rumors about the long lost treasure of whatever. And the players know that if they go searching for the long lost whatever, that's what they're going to acquire. But how they get there is the adventure. And they already know what the reward's going to be. So I don't have to play a shell game with it. It's like, oh, your princess is in another castle. No, you wanted to go grab the long lost sword of King Theodore. Well, here's the last known place of where it existed. Go seek it out. But my absolute favorite reward that I do for games is the personal growth reward. And this is where I take the backstory, the background, whatever the character has in its history before the game actually starts. Because, I do like having my players come from somewhere to go somewhere else. And I try to take in what their goals are, what they want to, end with their character, like what they want their character to go through. And I'll take all that into consideration, and then I will make little personal quests for each character in the game. And I will tie it somehow to the main goal of the campaign. But those personal quests will offer unique powers, abilities, or items to the specific characters because they are tailored to advancing that character and that player to the next level or to the next thing, to help them grow as players and characters at the same time. And what I have experienced when I do this is that my players are far more engaged in not just the game, but the game world. They are far more immersed when I actually take into consideration what they are, wanting to achieve with their characters. Because one, that means I'm paying attention as a game master to my players. I am engaging with them. And two, I am rewarding them for good role play and interacting with the world. So what they get out of it is, oh, if I, am willing to actually work at this and get into character and get into the game world, my game master has all of this already set up. I have to go find it. And the only way I'm going to find it is by playing the game.
Yeah, it's it really should be the journey, not the destination. There is no final destination for most character story arcs. Hopefully, players will start to see that, and GMs as well, because unfortunately, that final destination is either retirement or death, and nobody, in the gaming world should be looking forward to either of those, because then the game's over. And without the growth and the rewards along the way, and of course the trials and tribulations, it really is just an analog video game.
Yeah. So I think that is where we're going to end it for the evening. If you've liked the video, please consider hitting the like button. If you really enjoyed tonight's content, please consider subscribing to myself and Shadow. The links are in the description below, and you are currently watching on Jaide's Tabletop Tavern. I want to thank you, the chat, for being with us this evening and giving us some feedback, as it's very helpful for when you participate. So with that, I wish you all a very, very nice evening, and if you're watching this later, a very good day.
Good night,
Later, everyone.